The Tempest. Once, long ago, in the faraway country of Italy, there was a Duke of Milan called Prospero. He was a wise and learned man, more interested in books than in ruling his country. He left the care of political affairs to his brother Antonio, while he himself studied strange sciences and books of magic. Antonio, however, was jealous of his brother. He felt that while Prospero remained in Italy, he would always be considered the real Duke of Milan, and Antonio wanted that title for himself. And so he and Alonso, the king of Naples, made a wicked plan. They decided to send Prospero far away from his country so that Antonio could rule Milan in his place. One dark, stormy night, Prospero was secretly taken prisoner by his enemies and carried down to the seashore. His little 3-year-old daughter, Miranda, was taken with him, and they were put into an old boat which had neither sails nor oars. Antonio had ordered that they were to take nothing with them, not even food. He was certain that the old boat would sink in the stormy seas, and Prospero and Miranda would be drowned. He did not dare to murder them in Milan, knowing how greatly they were loved by all the people. There was, however, one kind old man among Alonso's noblemen, whose name was Galonzo. He secretly put food and warm clothes and water into the boat, and he added some of Prospero's books, knowing the Duke's love for his library. The little boat was pushed out to sea, and for many hours it rocked helplessly on the waves. The small Miranda was too young to be afraid, and she slept peacefully in the bottom of the boat. But Prospero began to doubt whether they would ever see land again. At last the storm ended, and the sea was calm once more. Perhaps Prospero's magic had something to do with it, for he was a very clever man, practiced in the art of magic. Perhaps the good fairies were watching over him and his little daughter. Whatever the cause, when morning came, Prospero saw an island in the sea ahead of him, and soon he managed to steer the boat to the sandy shore. He landed safely and carried the sleeping Miranda to a sheltered cove. Then he returned to the boat to fetch their clothes and his precious books. Those books were a great help to him in the years that followed. There seemed to be no one living on the island, but it was rich and green, with a plentiful supply of fruit and vegetables and fresh streams of water. Prospero decided that he and his little daughter would be able to live there in happiness and comfort for as long as there was necessary. He soon discovered, too, that there were fairies on the island, and he was glad that he had spent so many years in studying magic. His knowledge gave him power over all these strange creatures, the chief of whom was a fairy called Ariel. Prospero found Ariel quite by chance when he was walking through the woods one day. He heard a voice crying pitifully from inside the tree, and with his magic, Prospero was able to split the tree open. To his astonishment, a pretty little fairy flew out from the center of the tree. The fairy, who said his name was Ariel, had said story to tell. He had been imprisoned in the tree for 12 years through the magic of a wicked old woman called Sycorax. When Sycorax first came to the island, Ariel had many other fairies and had refused to obey her, and to punish them she had imprisoned them all inside these trees. Now she was dead, and no one lived on the island except her ugly half-mad son, Caliban. Prospero freed all the fairies from their woody prisons, and they gratefully promised to help him, faithfully in anything he ordered them to do. Prospero then went in search of the ugly Caliban. He found him hiding fearfully in a cave, and at first he tried to teach the miserable creature some of his knowledge. He taught him the names of the sun and the moon, and he fed him on the berries and water and was gentle and kind to him. But Caliban was wicked, stupid, and ungrateful. And finally, Prospero made him his slave. He had to carry water and cut firewood and lived in a little cave by himself. And so Prospero and Miranda lived on this magic island helped by the fairies and served by the ugly Caliban. It was more like a wild beast than a man. 12 years passed, and Miranda grew to be a beautiful girl. In all those 12 years, she had never seen a human being except her father. She remembered nothing of their life in Milan because she had been so young when they left Italy, nor did she know that her father had once been the Duke of Milan. She was perfectly content to live on the island and asked for nothing different. And then, one day, there was a terrible storm. Miranda stood on the shore watching the wild waves and the heavy rain sweeping across the sea, and suddenly she saw a ship being carried by the strong tide toward the rocks. In those days there were no steamships, and the sails of the ship were torn by the wind, and the great waves washed over the docks. Even above the noise of the storm, Miranda could hear the sailors crying for help. "All lost! To prayer! Mercy on us!" She heard them cry, and she ran to tell her father. Surely he, with the fairies to help, and his great knowledge of magic, could do something to save the ship. But Prospero did not seem greatly anxious about the fate of all the sailors. He told Miranda that all would be well and that no harm would come to the ship. He himself had caused the storm. He intended to frighten the people on board, but they would none of them be drowned, and the ships too would be saved. "But why are you doing this?" Miranda asked. "These men have done you no harm." Prospero smiled at her sadly. "Many years ago they did me great harm, my child," he said gently. "The time has come for me to tell you all about it. So let us sit down on this rock while you listen to my story." So Miranda sat at her father's feet, and he told her about their life in Milan and the reason why they were now living on the lonely island. "I am still the rightful Duke of Milan," he finished, "and now my opportunity has come to revenge myself on my enemies. They are all on board that ship rolling in the waves. Alonso, the king of Naples, arranged for his daughter to marry a foreign king, and he hired the ship to carry them across the sea to Africa. The wedding is over, and they are now returning to Naples. The king's son, Ferdinand, is with his father on board, and my brother Antonio and the king's brother, Sebastian, are also with them." Prospero had learned all through this strange powers, and he had planned the storm. With Ariel's help, he arranged that the ship should be driven towards the island by the winds, and that it should seem to be wrecked on the rocky shore. "Nobody will be hurt," he promised his daughter, "but they must be punished and made to regret their unkindness to us both." Miranda trusted her father and knew that he would not break his promise to her. So, tired with all the excitement of the storm, she lay down and went to sleep. Then Prospero called to Ariel to him, for he had more work for him to do. Ariel had a very busy morning, and he felt tired and cross. He began to complain to his master. "What? Is there more work?" he said. "Don't you remember that you promised me my liberty if I served you faithfully in this matter? I have brought the ship to the island, and now I want to be free." "The time has not yet come," Prospero answered. "Have you forgotten how I saved you from a terrible imprisonment? Do you want to be locked in that tree again? If you have served me for 2 more days, you shall be free to go where you will." "That's my noble master," said Io gratefully. "What shall I do? Say what? What shall I do?" Prospero told him to take the shape of a sea fairy. Only Prospero must be able to see him, but others could hear his voice. "Bring Ferdinand here," Prospero told him, and Ariel went in search of the king's son. Ferdinand had been washed ashore alone, on one side of the island, and he was filled with sorrow and despair, because he thought that his father and all the others on the ship must have been drowned. Suddenly he heard a mysterious voice singing to him, and the words made him more miserable still. for the voice was telling him that his father was drowned, lying at the bottom of the sea. This was Ariel's idea of a joke, and rather unkind. Poor Ferdinand walked in the direction of the voice, and it led him on and on through the woods. What was this strange music? Surely this must be a magic island. Where can this music be? Ferdinand wondered. Is it in the air on the earth? Miranda saw Ferdinand walking towards them, and she was astonished. She'd never seen such a beautiful person, and she felt sure he must be a fairy. No, he isn't a fairy, Prospero told her. He eats and sleeps just as we do. He was on the ship, and now he's looking for his father and his friends. Ferdinand looked up and saw Miranda, and he was certain, too, that she was no human being. This must be the fairy who was singing so sweetly, he thought, and he asked her if this was so. No, I am human, just as you are, Miranda answered, and Ferdinand was greatly astonished to hear her speak the same language as he did. Her gentleness and beauty made him love her at once, and she, on her side, loved him too. This was just what Prospero had hoped for, that Ferdinand and Miranda should love each other and wish to marry. Delicate Ariel, I'll set you free for this, Prospero promised, delighted. But first he wished to test Ferdinand to make sure he was really sincere in his love for Miranda. So he spoke angrily to the young man, pretending to think Ferdinand was an enemy. He accused him of being a rival, of wanting to take Prospero's island and rule over it himself. Ferdinand denied it, and Miranda begged her father not to speak so roughly to the poor young man, but Prospero took no notice of her. Come with me, said to Ferdinand. I'll make you my prisoner and my slave. I'll chain your neck and feet together. I'll feed you on dead roots of seawater. Follow me. Ferdinand was extremely angry. He's a king's son, and to be treated like this, it was an insult. He tried to draw his sword to pry Prospero, but he found he could not move. Prospero's magic power was too great for him, and Ferdinand decided that he could best show his love for Miranda by doing what Prospero ordered him to do. Miranda felt ashamed of her father's treatment of this young man. Be comforted, she said to Ferdinand. My father is kinder than he seems. I am sure he will not harm you. And so Ferdinand obeyed Prospero's command and went to the cave. Here he was made to cut wood and carry logs, just as Caliban had, but he did the work cheerfully and without content because he was near Miranda. And as for Miranda, she could not understand her father's behavior. If Prospero knew Ferdinand to be the son of the King of Naples, how dare he treat the young man like a slave? It made tears come to her eyes to think of it. Poor Ferdinand looked tired out with the unaccustomed work, and she begged him to let her help her study. My father is hard at study, she said. Pray now rest yourself. He's safe for these 3 hours. But Ferdinand continued to work, and while he worked he told Miranda how much he loved her. My heart flies to your service, he told her, and it is for your sake that I am this patient logman. But do you love me? Miranda asked. Ferdinand repeated that he did, and made her promise to marry him as soon as he could return to Naples. I have never before seen any man except my father, Miranda said, but I would not wish for any companion in the world except you. And unseen by Ferdinand and Miranda, Prospero had been listening to their conversations. He felt sure now that Ferdinand was a good man and would always be true to Miranda, so he appeared to them again and smiled at Ferdinand. If I have ever seemed cruel, it was only in order to test your love for each other, and now I feel I can trust my daughter to your care. Ferdinand, as soon as you return to Naples, you may marry her. Ferdinand and Miranda were overjoyed, and Prospero left them together, saying he had work to do. Meanwhile, things had not been going so well on the other side of the island, where the rest of the ship's party had been washed ashore. King Alonso was tired and unhappy because he was sure his son Ferdinand had been drowned. Gonzalo, the kind old man who had helped Prospero 12 years before, tried to comfort his king by saying that Ferdinand was an excellent swimmer. The sailors had been the young man swimming strongly toward the shore, and Gonzalo was sure that Ferdinand must have reached somewhere. But Alonso would not be comforted. It seemed to him that they must have seen the whole island already, as they had searched for hours, yet they had not found his son. No, no, he's gone, he's drowned, the king said sadly. We can search no more, let us sit down and rest. Prospero's brother Antonio and the king's brother Sebastian were with them, and they all sat down together on the grass. They had been consistently followed by Ariel, who made loud and frightening noises around them, and their hearts were filled with fear and confusion. They were thirsty and hungry too, but they had nothing to eat or drink, so Alonso and Gonzalo wrapped their coats around them and were soon fast asleep. The wicked Antonio, however, was up to his old tricks. This time he was planning to kill his former friend Alonso and make Sebastian king of Naples in his place. Here was their chance. Alonso and Gonzalo were both sleeping peacefully, and there was nobody to witness the crime. But Prospero, through his magic powers, knew what Antonio and Sebastian were planning to do. He sent Ariel to protect the king and to frighten them all so much that they would be sincerely sorry for their past cruelty to Prospero and Miranda. Ariel arrived just in time. He found Antonio and Sebastian there, swords in their hand, standing over their sleeping king, and he wakened Gonzalo and Alonso before any harm could be done. But the king still had to be taught a lesson and be punished for his past crimes. The puzzled men suddenly heard strange and lovely music, and Ariel and other fairies dressed in mysterious shapes set a wonderful feast before them. But just as the hungry men were sitting down to eat, Ariel changed himself into a great ugly bird. He flew noisily over the table and making everything disappear as mysterious as it had appeared. Ariel, still in the shape of the bird, spoke to Alonso, Antonio, and Sebastian. "You are 3 wicked men," he said. "You have been brought to this lonely island because you are too wicked to live with other men." And he went on to tell them that this was their punishment for their crimes against Duke Prospero, and that only one thing could save them from the death on the island. They must show sincere regret for their wickedness and promise to lead a better life in the future. Then, with lightning flaming around him and a roll of thunder, Ariel disappeared. Alonso, Antonio, and Sebastian were filled with fear and sorrow. Many violent and terrible things had happened to them within the last 24 hours, and they knew that the punishment was a just one. They swore they would be better men. Then, and only then, Prospero appeared before them in his magic coat. He thought that they had been punished enough by all they had suffered since the beginning of the storm. At first they did not recognize him, but when he removed his magic coat and they saw who he was, they all begged his forgiveness and asked him to come back as the Duke of Milan. Prospero turned to Alonso. "Since you have given me back my dukedom," he said, "I will repay you with a good thing." And he took him to the entrance of the cave which has been his home for so long. How thankful Alonso was when he looked inside and saw Ferdinand sitting there with a beautiful girl. When he was told that the girl was Miranda, Prospero's daughter, Alonso begged her forgiveness for his former treatment of her father. "Give me back my dukedom," he said, "I will repay you with a good thing." And it took him to the entrance of the cave, which had been his home for so long. How thankful Alonso was when he looked inside and saw Ferdinand sitting there with a beautiful girl. When he was told that the girl was Miranda, Prospero's daughter, Alonso begged her forgiveness for his former treatment of her father. And when he heard that Ferdinand was to marry this lovely girl, his happiness was great indeed. "Give me your hand," said Alonso to the 2 young people, "and may all those who do not wish you well suffer pain and sorrow for the rest of their lives." And now the faithful Ariel led the lost sailor to their king, and they brought the news in that ship, and it wasn't wrecked, and everyone had feared. And the next day they all sailed back to Milan, where Ferdinand and Miranda were married, and Prospero ruled again as Duke, to the great rejoicing of all his people. Ariel flew with the ships as far as Italy to protect it from the storms, and then he was free forever. He flew away across the sea, singing happily, "Where's the bee sucks, there sucks I, in a cowslip bell I lie. There I couch, when owls do cry, on the bat's back I do fly, after summer merrily. Merrily, merrily shall I live now, under the blossoms that hang on the bough." The end.